Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa.
Maria Ressa carries the torch of press freedom in a country held in thrall by a populist president.
It started with the drug war.
Do not do drugs because I will kill you.
Ramona, talk about this passion project of yours. Why is it your passion project?
They're
And
all
as a
passion
filmmaker,
projects.
what are the challenges that did you encounter?
A lot, right? I mean, just for all my projects, I have to move to the Philippines, right? Because it's not, I don't helicopter in. I have to move there, figure out what's going on the ground, and then figure out the story. I mean, I do, of course, arrive in the country with the large themes. So I knew I wanted to make a film about the Philippines under Duterte because it was alarming what was going on, right? I'm a martial law baby. I grew up under martial law, and it seemed like, wait, what's happening? We fought this already. This is a battle we won. So that was, that's what I wanted to do. So that it was key for me to really figure out the story of the Philippines right now. And of course, Maria then emerged, right? Because she was then speaking so loudly against Duterte with Rappler and also talking about disinformation. So it was all of these sort of very specific issues, specific to the Philippines, but also very global, right? So there is a very specificity of the story and also the universal aspects of the story that I thought would resonate beyond the Philippines. As you know, Janet, I'm always telling stories that go beyond the Philippines because my audience is here. I produce my films here. So, and they're always all passion projects. You have to be, I get obsessed with especially the people I film because, I say that I make documentary films in order to experience all these things, like, right? I did Journey because I wanted to see what it felt to be a rock star. So I guess I'm doing 1,000 cuts to see what it feels like to be this beleaguered journalist who's like the object of the administration's hatred. Not hatred, but
So, and Maria, what made you agree to this documentary, and how was it filming with Ramona?
How funny. So first, let me correct Ramona. She said I was speaking so loudly, right? Remember, all I was doing was holding the line. At that point, I was just saying, look at this disinformation. I was actually so careful not to be seen as attacking for my personal purpose, which is what journalists do, right? We don't do that. But the abuses of power really pushed me beyond. And it's a combination of the actions of the Duterte administration and the actions of Silicon Valley, right? We needed to challenge impunity on two fronts, Facebook and the drug war. Anyway, so why Ramona? I think three reasons. The first is, like you, Janet, right? Filipino American. It's being Filipino is one thing, being American is another thing. Being Filipino American is actually another thing. And you're part of both worlds, but you're part of neither. I always say, I think you guys probably feel this. I always say I feel most Filipino when I'm with Americans and most American when I'm with Filipinos. And I try so hard in my life to pull the best of both worlds together. I thought Ramona understood that. And that's a unique perspective. The second was because so much was happening during this time, I knew we needed to document it. And I had, the Manangs, the founders of Rappler, we had talked about this amongst ourselves. I'm like, oh my God, guys, look at what's happening. Why are we not doing a story? Well, we can't keep doing stories about ourselves. We don't do that, right? So we were forced to. So here comes this third party filmmaker. I'll tell you the first thing, but so she was this, she had, we knew it was going to be shot well. We knew it was going to be someone else documenting it, someone who was a witness to it, right? Not us, because it should be documented. And then the third was trust. And, and I'll start with this, when Ramona first came to my office, what I remembered was that she turned me down for an interview on Imelda in 2004, right? So that's what I told her. But I think, what wound up happening was I watched her over time, right? So you give access, because at that point I was pretty open, because that was the only way. We needed to tell our stories. We needed to shine the light, and other people need to tell our stories. We can't tell it ourselves. And so, with what we gave her, then it was Ramona. Then it was looking at her. Is she trustworthy? I liked how she was upfront, that she was also following people that I personally wouldn't have had access to. So I found that interesting. And then I watched her kind of stumble at the beginning on how to tell me about it. And that was kind of interesting also, because it's Filipino American, right? She knew she was going to be transparent, but it was like this combination. Sometimes she's more Filipino than I am. And then I also watched the way she dealt with no. Because at the beginning there were lots of no's, and she would first try like a bull. She would pound her head against the wall. We're very good walls also. And then when she realizes we're not going to move, then she pulls back a little bit and then tries to go through an open window. So that's pretty good too. So I thought, okay. And then we just cut our own things, right? Can I trust you? And she got access to everything at a certain point. Everything.
Everything actually.
And the film also shows you Maria interviewing Duterte at several instances. What were your thoughts during those interviews and feelings while you were talking to him?
I think the first one was when Duterte was still a mayor. I was in Davao City. Actually, I was running a workshop, and he was kind of an add-on because I was in Davao, right? So we weren't sure he was going to run yet. So we asked him for an interview, and he said yes. Shocking. Weirdly refreshing when someone you interview who at that point was probably going to run for president admits that he killed 3 people on camera. I didn't know what to do. Do I keep nodding, or do I say, what? I should have done the what? I should have done that, but I didn't. And then he was the right personality at the right time in that sense, because he was so straight talking, and he was very clear on message. So it was not a surprise in a field of 5 candidates, he received 39% of the votes. In 2016, after he was president, I was one of 4 journalists that he gave an interview. He granted the request for interviews. And then this was December of 2016, and I was really focused on an obsession I have with leaders, because the leadership style of every person determines the strengths and weaknesses of whatever they lead, whether it's a small club or a nation. And so at that point, and I think Ramona used it in the film, I was focused on what were his values. At that point, I asked him, do you still want to use violence and fear? Is that necessary to lead? Because most leaders after victory want to unite. This is a president who emphatically said violence and fear. He wants people to be afraid of him, right? So that was interesting as well. I think we were demonized to Duterte by people around him, and that happened afterwards. I think also he expected us to be patronage driven. Because he granted access, he expected that we would not be journalists. I don't know what he was thinking, but maybe welcome to Manila, right? This is what we do. And so it leads to where we are today.
Yeah, I think there was because Rappler was one of the first ones to really cover him when he ran for president, right, in 2015, when he started running. And Pia Renata, who covered the president, was sort of the first one on the ground before the national press came on. So I think he felt a special affinity with Pia. And so when she said, she's a journalist, right? When that special affinity didn't bear out for him, then, Pia was still critical in our coverage, as she should be. He found that to be like a personal affront, right? Because what do you mean? We have this personal relationship. In the Philippines, very personal. Everything's personal. So suddenly you're still covering him, but you're critical because you have to be. He's president. He found that personally insulting, I think. He was shocked because remember, this guy ran Davao, right? Davao is a major city in the south, but it's a smaller press, right? Friendlier, maybe. Let's say friendlier. And then you go to the capital, this unruly press, right? I mean, and there's independent media. You can't really control them, and you're not supposed to. But I don't think he ever made that transition to national politics. Until now, he wants to be called mayor, right? He insists on being called mayor, which says a lot. So he never made that transition to being a national figure. He's still basically the small town mayor who is now president. That's the problem.
So Ramona, did you ever have any fears or got worried for your staff while filming this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially the local staff, right? Because they stay there. So aside from me, I brought on 2 cinematographers and a couple of sound people. Everyone else was local. The fixers, the field producers, everyone else. And we had a conversation when it was very apparent that we were covering Maria, and Maria was was in the crosshairs of the president. So I told them, you don't have to stay. I'm not going to take it against you. I truly understand. Because you're staying, we leave, right? Janet, not one of them left. They all said, no, this is the right story to tell. We should be telling the story. And even until now, as you know, we screened in the Philippines for free for 24 hours before the verdict. A lot of them took screenshots of their names and then encircled their names and posted it on Facebook at a time when there's an anti-terror law, at the time when there's, when things are, the walls are closing in. They're still really proud because they feel like it's the right story to tell right now, and it should be told. Yeah. So it's very touching. I mean, and they're really the best. Such an amazing group of people I worked with.
And Maria, you get a lot of threats and nasty messages. Do you ever fear for your life?
I mean, at different times, you can have infinite fears at this point in time, because having a government, waking up on July 8th and having the president in a late night rambling conversation, threaten you, that's kind of, but I think the virus, the pandemic, and the lockdown that came, it's been good and bad. Good in the sense that I've gotten more sleep. Bad in the sense that it means it's harder for journalists to hold power to account, but also good in the sense that Filipinos demand that we be protected. We hope, right? Because look, President Duterte's style is to demonize any critical voice. He actually did try to demonize the virus. He said he was going to swat it away. But it's very hard to demonize the virus. And so in this one, this is now government on test. Government needs to deliver. And if it doesn't, actually the risk, it's Filipino lives at stake. So I hope that it focuses. And of course, we're seeing that's not the case. Congress has prioritized things like shutting down ABS-CBN, or the largest broadcaster here, right? Or passing an anti-terror law. There are so many things that shouldn't even be. How do you shut down a network that is a blue chip company that has 11,000 employees, right? I mean, and then let's not even talk about the impact on press freedom. When I hear Filipino reporters talk about a chilling effect, we're beyond chilling effect. We are already in Siberia. We're just looking Siberia on the edge of a cliff, about to get pushed off, right? So, yeah, I can be afraid of 10 million things, and sometimes our lawyers do that. Like they'll say, yeah, but Maria, you have to be prepared for this and this, and I'm like, guys, I could be charged with child abuse, even though I don't have a child, and I'll be convicted. so maybe I shouldn't be that flippant, but you know what I mean?
Don't give them ideas.
I know. I'm just saying that I've said this now, this is a long haul battle. It's been 4 years so far. And some days I wake up and I feel really, really good. And other days I wake up and I'm not so good, But I think that what unites all of the days is the idea that in a weird way, it's good that the government focused on me because I'm in great shape. I know why I'm a journalist. I have an organization we built from scratch that understands the mission of journalism, that understands the context of the times. Every person in Rappler chose to be in Rappler. And you know what? Like Nietzsche was right. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. In a way, I have to thank the government for allowing us to find a sustainable business model that is away from advertising. Because the government filed all these cases against us in 2018, by April, we had dropped 49% of our advertising revenue. So we were really forced, within 2 weeks' time, we gave ourselves a task. We have to find a sustainable business model that isn't advertising. We did find it. From 2018 to the end of 2019, that little B2B model grew 12,000%. So we are actually well poised to deal with this lockdown. Right? So I guess, Janet, you know this, you look for the bright side. There is always a way to look at things as glass half full. And the best part is this time matters, right? In the Philippines, the next few months will determine whether or not we have elections, whether or not we remain a democracy, and whether or not Filipinos care about the rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution. We've said this a long time ago, you know, we get the government we deserve. So I guess this particular time, democracy globally is being rolled back by cheap armies on social media. There is a dictator's playbook. So we will get the democracy we deserve. So I'm hoping that we stand up, we use our rights, because if we don't use it, we'll lose it.
One of the things that impressed me about the documentary from Mona is she was able to capture you remaining so cool, collected, and calm despite all the threats and the challenges you've encountered. Were you like that all the time? You're always the cool eye in the storm. And as a kid, were you like this? So how do you manage these things and stay calm?
I do three things. So I'll tell you three things. So the first is, you know, when I was a kid and we had just moved from the Philippines to the United States, I realized that our fears stop us from doing what we want to do. That's a very easy early realization. So I embraced my fear. I realized, I decided I wasn't going to be my own worst enemy. I think the second thing is that it is what you make of it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. There were three things. Remind me of your question again.
How do you stay calm in the eye of the storm?
Okay. The second thing is CNN, right? Look, live shots. So I got used to doing, you know, I've covered the transition to democracy of every country in Southeast Asia that's done that since 1986. So I was doing, like, the fall of Suharto in 1998. I was doing live shots galore. I can always distill into three, which is why even until today, I distill my thoughts into three in the moment. And I know that when you ask me a question I may not have the answer to, I can't be afraid, because if I'm afraid, then I'll garble. And I just need to be straightforward, right? So I've learned how to push down uncertainty in the pit of my stomach. The third is, and I recently thought about this, I thought about the worst moments. Because I led a team in conflict zones, in war zones. I remember days when, you know, I remember this one time when we were the only remaining news crew, and this was in East Timor, and there were militia and Indonesian military patrolling, looking for people. Our messenger had already been beaten up, so we shut off all the lights in the house and we hid under the bed, waiting and hoping that a plane from Jakarta that we had just chartered would be able to land, right? So I've been face down on the pavement when you're caught in the crossfire, and more afraid of my colleague than I was for myself. I've made bad decisions in the past. No one is perfect, and some of the decisions are life and death decisions. This one is just managing my fear. That's easy. And I have a great team, and my co-founders are incredible, and the stakes are so high. If it was just a pride thing, like if President Duterte and I are alone in a room and he just wants me to say he's right, yeah, fine, you're right, man. But it's not. There's so much at stake. So we're good. I'm good. Calm ba. I try to be optimistic because, you remember that book? What book was that? Like I read this when I was a kid where you wake up every day and you talk about the things you should be glad about. Do you remember that book? It's not Pippi Longstocking, is it? Do you remember that, Janet?
No. Which one was that?
Okay. Well, so I'll find it and I'll remember. But I just remember before, right? When you're down, if you dive into the depression, you rob yourself of your own power. And it goes back to that whole thing. Embrace your fear. Because in the end, the battle begins in your mind. And if you're strong in your mind, then you will get through it.
That's nice.
I think it's also in your DNA. No, it is. It's this preternatural calm in the face of the face of a dire situation. I think the perfect example, and I always say this, was right after your verdict. It's an amazing thing to watch because right after the verdict, she had a press conference, right? And she clearly articulated what was wrong with the verdict. Much more clear. It's clearer than your, should I say this? I love Ted, but clearer than your lawyer, right? And you're very articulate about what's wrong and what you should do and why it's bad. After you were convicted, right? You yourself. So that's quintessential Maria, I always say, right? It's like that, the calm and clarity. And I think that's I don't know, I think it's part of your DNA to have that thing. I mean, it is embracing your fear. It is really training your mind and seeing the glass always as half full. But at the end, I think it's something deeper than that, right?
Yeah,
you're born with something. It's true. Yeah.
And Maria, you also spent a lot of time with Ramona. What did you learn about Ramona as a filmmaker or as a person?
She's stubborn. This is what Rapplers will tell you about Ramona. Ramona never takes no for an answer. And that's pretty good because that's what Rappler reporters also do, right? So in that sense, I think I kind of said it earlier, a shared perspective of the world. Filipino-American is its own thing when you've lived in both worlds and you have a foot in both worlds. And I've always been like that in the Philippines because in fact, I would say Ramona is more connected to the Philippines. Her roots are here. I am a journalist in the Philippines, and I chose to make the Philippines my home, but I don't have the deep ties here because my family is kind of all over the world. My parents are in Florida. You know what I mean? So it's, I have a sister in LA. So anyway, I think that I think we both learned something from each other. That was interesting. And then having a constant witness. I mean, we were forced to become friends, even if we weren't friends before, right? Because we spent so much time together. The weirdest moments.
Yeah, the weirdest moment. But that's what I do, right? I come into people's lives at the weirdest moments. But I think more than any other person I've filmed, right? Looking at my past work, it's Maria that I could have been friends with even without the film. At some point, our lives could have intersected, and we would have been friends. I think, and I
would have intersected in 2004 if Ramona had granted the interview to CNN.
Okay. I just need to clarify that. In 2004, I flew to the Philippines because Imelda Marcos was suing me and my distributor because she did not like the film Imelda. All right. So she said we sullied her good name. So I landed in the Philippines in the middle of a crazy, hectic film festival run, right? I was in the circuits. I was traveling all over the place. I was actually going to the Philippines on my way to Sydney, but I needed to stop by in the Philippines to appear in court before, to defend the film. I land in the Philippines and the publicist for the distributor gives me a list And on the list is Maria Ressa of CNN. I'm like, oh my God, Maria Ressa of CNN, because she was the face of CNN. I was so excited. And then someone said, well, she doesn't really like the film. She has a few questions to ask. I'm like, doesn't like the film? I'm like, listen, I want to talk about the court case, but really I don't want to litigate my film, right? I don't want to talk about the film. I just want to talk about the court case because the film is already out. It's been reviewed and all that. So I said, no. I said, please tell her no. And they said, oh my God, no one turns out Maria Ressa of CNN. I said, no, just tell her I'm busy or something. Just say no. So the interview didn't happen. So fast forward for 14 years later, I am in her office asking her to be part of the film. And I'm thinking inside, oh my God, I hope she doesn't remember. Oh my God. And of course she remembers. She goes, yeah, you turned me down and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, huh? Of course, yeah, at that point, you're like, I can't pretend that I don't remember. I'm like, yeah, Maria, but you have to understand, blah, blah, blah. Now, can you still be in my film? And she, for all it's worth, she still entertained the thought of being in the film. Of course, I had to earn the trust, but she was open to, to the film. But that is a history of that. So we almost met. But there, I think also we have this sort of opposite personal histories. Like I came of age in the Philippines. Like I grew up there. I was born and raised there, left for university. But Maria came of age here in the States and then was an adult in the Philippines. I became an adult here. I lived my adult life here. So I learned to be an adult here and she learned to be an adult in the Philippines. So it's kind of opposite, which is really interesting to me because it's this contrast, but yet there are so many similarities, there's a commonality and we intersect in a lot of ways. And that's why I say, so I think probably we could have been friends at some point, right?
So a theme that came from Imelda, sorry, go ahead, Janet.
No,
Ramon. I was going to say,
how was your interview with Mocha and Bato? That interview.
I was really drawn to Mocha because she was the singer-dancer was now in government who believed truly in Duterte, right? In your own narrative, you're never the bad guy, right? So I just wanted to see what was behind that. She intrigued me, truly. And of course, listen, I don't want to be an apologist for Mocha. She does amplify untruths, right? That I see that, I know that. But yet I wanted to see what her motivation was. Everyone has a motivation. Everyone has a story to tell. And I wanted to get to that. And so, and I think she said yes because she's going to run for Congress. She also knows the power of story. She also knew my previous work and she wanted to be part of it. She knows my stories play out in the West and she wanted to be part of that. And as for Bato, the same thing, right? He was going to run for Senate. And so he knew the value of a good story. Both of them did. And of course they do like being in front of the camera. And when you ask people to be filmed, they always have this feeling that they will sort of, I hate to say the word convert, but they will talk you into believing in their side because they believe so much in their powers of persuasion. And that happened with Mocha and Bata. But I was very transparent with them. They knew the kind of film I was making. I also was very transparent with the president. The president knew I was making this because I talked to Andanar, right? I talked to his spokesperson. And I think that also was a shield for us because we were he saw us in the rallies, right? He gave us permission to film in the pit when no one else was given permission. The media were back there and we were in the pit and the media were like, oh, ba't kayo nandyan, di ba? Everybody's like, why are you allowed there? I said, because I asked, di ba? So I think that also protected us because we were very, very visible to him and we were not a surprise and that was a protection.
So they haven't seen the film yet?
But I think they have. So they've been sent, I think circuitously I've been sent messages that, they will reply to it in time. I don't know what that means, but yeah.
And Maria, I want to ask about the support of George and Amal Clooney to you. Can you talk about that?
I love them. Let me say the first time I really had to deal with the idea of prison was their fault. Probably in April last year, April of 2019, the Clooney Foundation invited me to help launch Trial Watch in Columbia University in New York. And I go there and they launched Trial Watch and we had our first meeting. But in the panel with me were two journalists. There was Mohammed Fahmy, who is a reporter who was jailed in Egypt with Al Jazeera, and then on my left was Jason Rezaian, who's now with the Washington Post, but he was jailed in Iran for 544 days. When I met him then, he gave me his book that had just been published. It's called Prisoner, and that listening to them made me realize I don't have it so bad. You know what I mean? Like, these guys lived through the things that I may have to live through, and that was when I began. The first time really thinking about possibly going to jail. I was like, it's scary, right? And that book helped me. So on the flight home, I read it cover to cover, and then I was in touch with both Jason and Yega and his wife, who's Iranian, who may not have survived in Iran if she hadn't been married to an American who was, a pawn in the relations between Iran and the United States. Anyway, that was when I met George and Amal Clooney. We met upstairs in a room. It was the office of someone, and I was first inside the room. Ramona was with us in that meeting, and we had asked if we could film this meeting. They said no.
I was thrown out of the room. I was so pissed.
And what they did is George, so they come in after, and Amal was with her mom, and what they did is as soon as they got into the room, George asked everyone to leave, and one of the people there said, wait, let me make coffee. He looks at the coffee machine. It was an espresso machine, and he laughed and said, I got this. And so Amal, as soon as she walks into the room, she starts talking in a way that I had to whip out my notebook, because everything she was saying, she essentially laid out what was going to happen in the coming months. And she's been absolutely spot on. And then while she was talking, she sat on the other side of the table. I was taking notes. George Clooney was making us coffee. How crazy is that? All I wanted to do while I was taking notes was like, can I whip out my phone and shoot the video? So Amal had remember that time period, Amal was negotiating with the Myanmar government for the release of the Reuters journalist. And there was a headline that, the government was standing firm. And she just said then, she said, Maria, this isn't for publication, but they'll be out in 2 weeks' time. And they were out in 2 weeks' time. So the day that they announced that, I messaged her and I said, so let me first say, so they did get out in 2 weeks' time. And then Amal essentially gave me a choice. Trial Watch can monitor our court cases, in which she said that if that's the case, then she can't be an advocate. She must look at the justice system, which also would have been really interesting. Imagine Amal Clooney judging the justice system. Or the other route is she said, well, if I'm your lawyer, then I can be an advocate. And she gave me the choice. Is there a choice? Which would you choose? And then actually I chose. I waited until the 2 weeks when the Reuters journalists were released. I emailed her immediately saying, Amal, please be my lawyer. And so that's how it began. They really were. I would say that what's interesting is I've learned so much about the law and the rule of law, because along with Amal, Keelan Gallagher, who is the lead counsel for the family of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the woman who was a car bomb was, she challenged, she was killed in a car bomb. Similar things, and Keelan was her. So Keelan and Amal worked together, along with Covington, a classmate of mine from Covington, offered their pro bono help, which is fantastic. And what I've learned is that as journalists are fighting for the truth, for facts, the lawyers are also trying to fight for rule of law and looking at the entire global legal system, which includes the UN and everything else, right? What are the global bodies we have? What are the treaties that the Philippines is signatory to? There's so many things. And so like I said, there's always a silver lining to everything. I don't think I would have learned as much. Well, now I definitely have skin in the game, right?
So the last
I
question
think
is,
Amal is really smart, right? I mean, right? She's beautiful and all that, and then she's smart, pa. Because I've been in other meetings where we were allowed to film other that did end up
I
in the
told
film.
you,
She
we allowed
truly
Ramona everything.
everything. She truly takes over the room and takes over this discussion in a room full of high-powered male lawyers. She comes in and just and I'm like, wow, she's really smart, right? It's like, ew, she's pretty and smart and really smart.
But systematic, right? She looks for systemic solutions. And that's also what's interesting, because look at Trial Watch, the fact that their foundation created Trial Watch. And then do not underestimate George Clooney, which no one really does underestimate George Clooney. But I was so surprised because his father was a journalist. And so this couple, I mean, they've been great. I've done things like I land in an airport and there's this like photo of him, and so I snap it and I sent it to Amal, and then Amal texts back saying, we're always with you. I mean, who does that, right? So it was really kind of. I think they're great, and they definitely, I feel their support.
so what do you think the audiences would get after watching this movie for both of you? First,
I always turn that around. What did you get, right? I think people get certain things and definite things. So I always turn it around. What did you get? Whatever you got, that's the right thing to get, right? So, like I always say, I'm not after messages per se. I'm after experience in my films. But of course, in the process of that, you do get something for yourself as a message. So whatever that is the message that's right for you. I'm not prescriptive, but obviously there is a point in the film. There is a point of view because it is a film, and because I chose which shots you saw in the order you see them. So it is very much a voice. There's very much a voice in the film. But but if you were like to hold a gun to my head and what is it? It's really plain and simple. It's really democratic systems are fragile. Rights are fragile. You shouldn't take them for granted. These things can crumble. They can crumble more easily in the global south because the institutions are weak. But everyone should be a vigilant citizen, right? We all have to be vigilant. Don't take anything for granted. Vote. That's all I have to say. Vote.
and Maria, what do you hope audiences will get from this film?
I think in the big picture, to realize that democracy is at risk, that it is dying, if not dead, in some parts of the world, and that if we don't use our rights, we will lose them. The second is that the beginning of the end was enabled by technology, by American social media platforms, and that we need to demand accountability from them. This happened just overnight during your day. The giants, the titans, were called in front of the antitrust committee, right? But I don't think it's about antitrust. I think it really is about technology getting values. I mean, hello, enlightened self-interest for tech. They have to embrace what they have done, and they have to enable democracy to flourish. They cannot manipulate, they cannot allow themselves to make facts debatable. We already see what's happened to all of our societies. It is the way to cave democracy from within. Because if we don't have facts, then how can we make choices to vote? How are you going to know who to vote for if your facts are debatable? We don't live in the same shared reality. That's the second. I think the third one is, this is a question I always ask. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? I think that's a question every one of us have to ask, because that's really the big shift today. Not just your truth, but this shared truth, facts. What are you willing to sacrifice for it? Because that's a question we had to answer early in Rappler. And I'm willing to sacrifice a lot. But we can't do it alone. And so, of course, I hope Filipinos realize that we are in the process of our body politic is already weakened to the point that it is near death. What do we do? How do we act? We will get the government we deserve. So, eyes wide open. And I'm okay if we choose to let democracy die. I just, in some ways, it's easier for me. I've worked in Deng Xiaoping's China. I was president of the Foreign Correspondents Club in Jakarta under Suharto. It's very easy to work under dictators because the rules are clear. But when you report from that, everyone listening also knows the rules that you have to follow. It's this limbo where we're pretending to be a democracy with rule of law that requires infinite more courage, and it requires us to stand up and demand that the rights be exercised. So yeah, this is it, man. This is it. In the Philippines, in the United States, it's time. We need to choose, and the choice is yours. This is an individual battle for integrity.
Thank you very much to both of you. Wonderful talking to you and sharing
Hi,
your
Janet. Hopefully we see each other
Thank you.
at some point, right?
In real time.
We will not duck. We will not hide. We will hold the line.